Who would win in a fight? Chewbacca or Bigfoot? The Hulk or Thor? Aeneas or Abraham?
When the houses of these two great men clash, a war breaks out. A war for the cosmos. Stay tuned today on Born to Read. Well, you and I are both pretty big book nerds.
Bookworms?
Bookworms, book nerds, whatever you want to call it. And we found this one book that you and I both found pretty captivating. And I believe both of us ended up sitting down and reading it all in one sitting.
Yeah.
And that was for a variety of reasons. One, it's captivating. The subject matter is fascinating, infinitely practical. There's a lot of ways that it can apply into our individual lives, but also on a cosmic level, it has huge implications. The book is The Household and the War for the Cosmos by C.R. Wiley. And there's two main sections to the book. It's a book from Canon Press. Came out, I believe, last year. Was it 2019?
I think it was before that.
Nope, 2019.
Oh, wow.
2019.
Well, it's made quite the wave in
It's hot
only
off
a
the
year.
press.
Wow.
So, Jeremiah, there's the first section then is a section called piety. And that really stuck out to you.
That was my favorite part.
What was it that stuck out to you?
Yeah, so, well, growing up, and he kind of touched on this in the book, and I don't want to give too much away about this book because if you're listening to this and you haven't read it, you need to go buy 3 copies because you're going to read it. You're going to try to force 2 other people to read it. I guarantee you, because I've done it. It's so good that while I was reading it, I began regretting that I fold the pages over to mark my spot because I was like, I'm destroying such a good book. But piety, so he kind of touched on this a little bit, but modern day American piety is more or less quiet times, not that reading your Bible is bad, but the idea that we have of piety is more emotional. It's more, he walks with me, he talks with me, relational. And I would put it as feminine, but he begins to describe piety in a more historical, philosophical and theological way. And it is life-changing. I mean, there's no other way to put it. It's crazy. For example, I'm just going to read one quote. Oh, no, I'm going to read 2 quotes. And I think this is, ironically, this isn't in the piety section. But for me, I was like, okay, that's it. If I'm going to describe what he's teaching about piety, it's that. He says, we live by the light of tomorrow's sun, and that sun is the Lord God. This is the basis of our piety, the substance of our daily duties. And that's exactly what piety is. He first starts out by describing the coin, the Roman coin, where I believe it's Aeneas, I don't really know how to say it, has his father on his back, and he's walking. And it's this guy who's living to get a kingdom and get a princess or get a queen. He's living for tomorrow. And that's piety. Piety is living for, as C.R. Wiley said, for tomorrow. And for us, our tomorrow has to do with an inheritance that we have from Jesus Christ, who bought the world. He bought the cosmos. And that's what we're living for. We're living for our inheritance, which is the world. And I'm sure you have something to add about piety. That's just what I got from it.
And the definition there that you have of piety is living out a duty.
Right.
And it reduces what we do a lot is it reduces our faith when we reduce our faith to being just what I do when I feel like it.
Yeah.
or I just happen to go to church on Sunday, or I
Right.
just read my Bible in the morning, and I pray before my 3 meals. We view that as like that's what we like to do, and it feels good, and it connects us with God. But rather than viewing that as an actual duty, that's what we're supposed to do.
Right.
And I think he really drives that home, that whole section, that Aeneas had a duty to his family to get his father out of the city as it was being sacked by the enemy, and he gets out and goes on the run to his promised kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's looking not just now, not just where we are in the present, but he's looking future. He thinks on the micro scale,
Yeah.
and he thinks on the big scale. And when Wiley applies it to the household, he really does a good job of driving home this point that we're looking at a household is not just where people who happen to be related live together,
Right.
and they're doing things together, and they just happen to have meals during the day, but that there's actually something going on there that's bigger than just the 4 walls of that house.
Yeah, and I don't hate to bring it up, but I'm gonna bring it up. Wiley touches on Gnosticism a little bit, and with this definition of piety, with this working definition of piety that Wiley uncovers in this book, you cannot hold to it and at the same time believe that there is nothing for you on this earth.
Right.
Right? So
Right.
you can't live for tomorrow when you don't believe that grace is restoring the cosmos. If you believe that, there's nothing for you on this earth, it really does come down to an eschatological view in many ways. But mainly, I don't think that you can. I believe people do out of inconsistency, but I believe it would be very hard to believe there's nothing for us here tomorrow. We're living for the kind of the Gnostic, like, take me away, and to be pious in the biblical sense. And I think that's probably why the church has had to redefine it, because we've fallen into Gnosticism in so many ways.
Yeah, and it's a creepy, quiet little sneaky thing that Gnosticism that slips into our minds. But when he talks, he spends this good portion of this first section of piety comparing that story of Aeneas and Abraham. That they're both, you have Aeneas who's promised by the gods a kingdom across the sea, and he has to go get it. And he's going to have to put some work in, and he has to go get it. And then he compares it to the story of Abraham and saying, Abraham, you have been promised a kingdom. I'm going to promise you the world. I'm going to promise you your descendants are going to fill the earth.
Yeah.
Your descendants are going to be as numerous as the stars of the heavens and the sand of the sea. And so now you have these 2 separate families that have been promised the world.
Yeah.
And now and they're going to have to walk, and eventually those promises are going to have to cross, because as one family fills the world and the other family fills the world, there's only room for one. Right?
Yeah.
So somebody's going to have to bow at some point. And that's where, when he comes into the second section of being a war for the cosmos,
Right.
that when we're looking at life on this earth, we see this earth as the focal point of the universe.
Right.
That the angels in heaven are watching this grand story unfold. And there's a battle, and the battle that's going on can be pretty nasty. It can be a pretty nasty, bloody fight a lot of the times. And we often miss that for one reason or the other. And that war is beautiful, where he uses an exposition of the whole book of Ephesians, but specifically talking about the armor of God as what this battle plan is. That the book of Ephesians is a battle plan for the Christian. That's where we're supposed to be going, and it's a beautiful, glorious story that we see. It's like, and he ties it into marriage. That
Yes.
marriage is war. Having children is war. Why does the psalm say that children are like arrows in a quiver? Because arrows are devastating.
Yeah.
That's an instrument of war. It's a tool of war. We should be expecting battle and difficulty. And so when we go at it, we have to know, though, it's not just about real estate. We're not just trying to put light bulbs in the sockets. Right. We're not just trying to put food on the table. We're building something long term.
And when that comes to children, arrows, a bow and arrow, especially in that context, and even today, that's a long distance weapon. And children are long distance weapons. So when you become short sighted and you lose the view of the future, you're not going to want to have kids. And if you look at our country, that's what's happening. And I think what made Rome so great, and Wiley kind of talks about this, was the household of Abraham and the household of Aeneas kind of function off of the same assumption. They both operated, he puts it, as if there was a man upstairs. They disagreed who it was, but they both operated that way and operated as if they were being handed down a kingdom. And that's what made Rome so great. That's what made Abraham so great. In the end, Abraham won. Our household conquered Rome. And
yet it started with a seeming defeat.
Yeah.
Right? Because Aeneas' household takes over the world in the form of the Roman Empire. And they conquer Abraham's family. They conquer Jerusalem. They come in. They take over. They're ruling. And this man who comes, who's been the promise of the Abraham family, shows up. And who decides that this is the ultimate headbutting of the two households?
Yeah.
The one who says he's going to come and save the family shows up to say, I'm going to topple Aeneas' house.
Right.
And what happens? Abraham's house sides with Aeneas' house and kills their rescuer. And so right there you go, okay, Aeneas' house wins. And now we move on, and Aeneas is going to continue to conquer, and Rome is going to continue to dominate over the people of Israel, the Abrahamic people.
Yeah.
But that only lasted 3 days. And up from the grave he rose victorious and says, this house is coming down.
Right.
Because my house is being established. He comes out saying, this is my kingdom. All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go. And so these marching orders that were given, when you shift the way Wiley puts it, to look at Ephesians as a battle plan and not just nice suggestions. Children, obey your parents. Husbands, love your wives. When these are not just nice suggestions and they become marching orders and a battle plan, you start to see that plan unfold, and that beautiful story unfold. I think what you said there, though, also is that there's a man upstairs. One of the things I really enjoyed about what he said in here was viewing the cosmos as having a top. And so you mentioned Gnosticism, but he also attacks materialism.
Right.
That you have the people who have what's the guy's name that comes up with that narrates the documentary The Cosmos, the PBS show.
I don't know.
But he talks about this is all there is. They tell us we're stardust.
Oh, yeah.
They say that this is all there is. And what happens when everything is just material is that the cosmos is flat and boring. But when there is a man upstairs, you put a top, he's upstairs. We view this as this is a life that's bigger than even just life on earth, because there's eternal consequences. So you have, on one hand, we say we don't want to deny, or we want to deny Gnosticism, but we don't want to deny the spiritual. But we don't want to be so spiritual that we deny the existence and the importance of the material. There's a fine balance, and I think Wiley does a fantastic job showing where that gap gets bridged.
Oh, yeah. It's a very deep book. I've got to read it a couple more times. It gets very deep. I think the deepest part for me trying to swim through was when he was explaining that as humans, we twist things on their head all the time. And he was talking about the verse where Paul says, the God from whom all the fathers of the earth derive their name. That word fathers in Greek is patros. So he was saying families are a projection of God, but we as humans, we tend to think of that God's a projection of us. We have it flipped on its head. And so he was weaving that and just doing exquisite wordplay and showing how you do a couple flips, jumps, and actually, well, you think it's pretty simple. I thought it was pretty complex, but it ends up and you're just like, wow, I get it. The household is the way that you win the war for the cosmos because it's a projection of God. God came to save the cosmos. The cosmos isn't just the planet Earth. It's the way everything works. And the way everything works as a projection of God is through the family. And there's just so much. There's so much in this book. It's gold. It's a gold mine.
We could talk about this all day for sure. That there is a lot, and so I think it goes without saying that we both recommend this book.
Yeah.
Like I said at the top, we both read this in one sitting, so it's not a long book, just 150 pages or so. But yeah, one of the best books I've read this year for sure.
Oh yeah.
The only book thus far that I've read twice this year. So if that's not high enough praise, if you were to say on a scale of 1 to 10, where do you put it?
Let me preface this. I'm a very hard grader when it comes to books.
Same.
I'm going to say an 8. And
so what keeps it from the 10? What do you see as the partial flaw? There's enough there that gives you an optimistic view of the book, but enough that you reserve a little bit of caution.
Well, I guess if I'm going to answer that, it would be because sometimes I felt like it could have been more practical, and sometimes I felt like he could have been a little bit more post-millennial. But when you take his other book, Man of the House, and actually this is a sequel to Man of the House,
right?
Then you can't levy that practical thing. So if you take them together, take the whole series, and I think he's coming out with The Adventures of Tom Bombadil, which is the third part in this series. It'll probably be, the series itself will probably be a 10, but alone, for practical purposes, you have to dig in, do a lot of digging. Luckily, he does a lot of the heavy digging for you in his other book. But that's my reasoning.
Yeah, and I'd put it right there, 8.5. It's a.
What's the downfall for you?
It wasn't long enough.
Yeah.
There is he leaves you thinking, and he leaves you wanting to think more, and I think that's good.
I'm sure that was on purpose, though.
Oh yeah,
I'm sure he did that stuff on purpose.
Yeah, and when you walk away with it, I still find myself sitting at my desk at work thinking, wow, this keystroke has eternal consequences. Mm-hmm. Like there's so much that you really think about. It's changed my view of marriage and family and work and life. I don't drive my car the same way just because of reading this book as his perspective. So highly recommend it. If you haven't read it already, go check it out.
And we haven't even scratched the surface.
Yeah, it's so deep, so good. Once again, the book is The Household and the War for the Cosmos by C.R. Wiley. It's a publication of Canon Press. Go pick it up, Amazon, canonpress.com, anywhere you can find books.